Turn this video off now. I mean it. While it is fun to hear how the magic is done, what's more entertaining is trying to figure it out yourself. Keep the mystery alive. What's that? You're still here. Well, okay then. Let's talk about how wrestling pulls off the biggest of all stunts. Number 10, the Royal Rumble 1998 fire spot. I still remember this as a kid. It was amazing. For after Shawn Michaels, the Undertaker had gone to war, Kane arrived, and because he hated his brother, he set him on fire. I mean, why wouldn't you do that? The Big Red Machine used the casket that was ringside to achieve this, and yep, the pay-per-view ended with the dead man burning to death. It sucked to be him. For years this ruined my brain, but you can actually figure it out. Before Kane and Paul Bearer wheeled the coffin to the entranceway, you will notice that it's pressed right against the ring apron. The reason for this is because there's a trap door on the side of the thing which meant the Phenom could roll under the squared circle. Otherwise, he would have actually been dead. The reason Kane used an axe to smash this thing to pieces beforehand too is because it produced more oxygen, which meant the fire could burn brighter. I tell you, it's like Blink-182, it's the small things. Number 9, buried alive. The Undertaker had all the hardest gimmicks. As well as the casket match, he had buried alive, which actually was basically the same idea. The latter is way more dangerous though, because yeah, you literally bury your opponent beneath the dirt. That can go so wrong. Have you ever wondered why the setup was usually by the entranceway too? Well, it's because all of this was thought out. Much like before, when you did get hurled into the mud, there was a trapdoor in the side so you could roll to safety before, yes, getting killed. You can't breathe under dirt. That's why the positioning is so important, because you have to build this thing. It's like a theme park ride. It's quite intricate and specific. Mick Foley once mentioned how this empty space then gets replaced with more mud, so again, this deserves way more respect. It sort of underlines how audacious it was. Who even came up with it in the first place? Number 8, Vince McMahon's limo explosion. Well, this one was stupid, wasn't it? On a Monday Night Raw, we blew up a limousine. Why wouldn't we think to do that? It was in the summer of 2007 as the Mr. McMahon character was going to be killed off when the whole thing was dropped due to the Benoit murder-suicide. It was the worst time in wrestling. We still did see the car set on fire, however, so a lot of thought must have gone into this. You can't just turn up to work and plan this on the fly. Numerous people have chatted about this after the fact and even some of the continuity errors. The shot of McMahon's vehicle exploding was filmed before Raw, whereas Vince getting into the thing was during the show. So look at the ground next time you see this, you will notice it doesn't really match. It also meant if you were watching this live as a production assistant, you would have seen Vince get into the limo and then get straight out again, so it was proper Hollywood stuff. Imagine you didn't push play on the pre-tape at the right time. It's gonna look really silly. So it was all kind of dumb, but fair play to the crew who did sort it out. They are very good at their job. Number 7, Randy Orton sets Bray Wyatt on fire. Good grief, wrestling loves fire. Then look at AEW and Jack Perry. A dude can't help himself. WWE lent into this during the pandemic, which I do totally get. Normal sports entertainment was out the window, so you have to come up with new ideas. This was one of them. It also came with a huge plus, because filming things in the Thunderdome didn't actually have a real-life crowd, so that element was done. Don't even worry about it. That is how WWE was able to achieve this too, because they could stop things and tape around it. And if you can, you should. So basically, as soon as the time came, we tricked the cameras and the lines of sight as a puppet version of Bray Wyatt was put in place of the human. Otherwise, we would be setting fire to people. Not good. It's also why you'll never likely see it happen again, because I don't want to go back to this era. That is the only reason it happened. Number 6, the ring collapse spot. The first time we saw this was June 2003. Brock Lesnar suplexed the Big Show, and when they hit the ring, it blew up. It was super cool. Of course, ever since those involved have said it wasn't planned, but if true, WWE most likely would have been sued. I think they'd realize having two giants in there and not reinforcing the foundations would at the very least be unprofessional. No one has ever gone properly on record officially, but when chatting to Chris Jericho on his podcast, Paul White did give us a little bit of insight. He revealed that the use of airbags underneath the wooden boards created the lopsided effect of the collapsed ring. Referee Mike Chioda also talked about this on Chris Van Vliet's show and said something similar. There is a hydraulic system in place to release the pressure as and when needed. So that is sort of badass. Number 5, Braun Strowman tips an ambulance. 2017 was a huge year for Braun Strowman. nowhere, WWE remembered the big guy should be super fun and booked the monster among men accordingly. I mean, the dude started flipping trucks over. Who doesn't like that? Given that Strowman was a former strongman, it was so easy to suspend your disbelief, even though it was silly. I get Heymons lifting cars slightly off the ground, but this was like throwing a micro machine. It got even better because it was inferred that Roman Reigns was in the vehicle, but of course he secretly snuck out when nobody was looking. Otherwise, this ride was rigged, so while I'm sure Braun did give it a big old shove, a machine basically did all the work. But like John Cena, you couldn't see it. Number 4, Kane gets set on fire, which kind of seems mean given his character, but hey, he was a heel, so screw that guy. Ever since Kane debuted in 1997, fire was the name of the game, which is why a year later, we did an Inferno match, where the point was to set everybody on fire. So it sounds exactly like you would expect, leading many fans to question, well, how are we going to do this? Because I don't really want to see a man's flesh burn. It was all obviously an elaborate stunt that saw the big red machine knocked into the flames, and his arm actually does light up. This was all kinds of crazy. You will notice the real-life Glenn Jacobs instantly ran to the back because, yeah, here we go again. If he didn't, he'd be dead. In 2019, Kane revealed all on the Pardon My Take podcast as WWE went full Hollywood here, right down to wrapping his limb in flame retardant paper and even being shown how to move it around to keep himself safe. So there was a huge element of risk here. Of course, as soon as he was backstage, he was fire extinguished out, checked. I don't think you get taught that in wrestling school. Number 3, the big boss man is hanged. This one is still insane. What were we doing? Because if you decided to just stop watching wrestling at the end of WrestleMania 20, you would have assumed the Undertaker murdered the big boss man. I mean, he literally hanged him from the top of the Hell in the Cell. I think I'm over it. We even had the shot of his lifeless corpse just swaying in the wind. And let's not do this again. It was way too much. It was also ridiculous as the next night on Raw he was fine, which made the whole thing incredible. Even in the make-believe world of wrestling, how did we do this? As it turned out, it was incredibly simple and came down to the boss man's ring attire. As he did basically wear SWAT gear that covered his whole body, WWE built a harness into the thing, so essentially the Undertaker just attached that to a noose. Now again, this was stupid, but in terms of achieving that effect, well, this one was pretty good. Number 2, Shane McMahon's huge falls. Nearly every single fall Shane McMahon took was terrifying. Calling them daredevil stunts is more than fair because they were nothing short of spectacular. The man has massive balls. It's sort of obvious how he pulled this off, as you could see it on every landing. WWE had constructed a massive crash pad to try and protect him. And sure, that is true, but I don't want to take anything away from Shane. The margin for error is still huge because even if you're a few centimeters off, bad times are coming. You also have to have complete faith it's going to work, and I tell you, I won't do it. Way too scared. The Mania 32 one is the best as The Undertaker throws McMahon from the top of the Hell in the Cell through a table, which actually looks like a balloon. That's right, we gimmick this thing too, and we didn't really try and hide it. That is good though. We're gonna go back to the theme of this video. I don't know whether you know this about me. I don't want anyone to actually die. Number 1, the wrestler emerges from under the ring. So this is why wrestling rocks. It proves it is all just magic, and I love it. Because nearly every time somebody does just magically emerge from under the ring, it gets a reaction, which means by and large the audience hasn't noticed. That's a huge pat on the back for the company in question. It's so simple too because it really is a sleight of hand. Sometimes, sure, the person underneath is there for the whole show. That is so ridiculous, a pay-per-view can go hours. That's why when a group of stagehands come to sort out the ring between matches, the needed performer is just hidden in this pack, and when the video is playing on the big screen as an extra distraction, whoosh, they slip under the ring. There's usually a monitor under there as well so the individual knows when it's time to appear, and this really is one of my favorites. Again, it's why wrestling is just the best. What an amazing thing to craft and then successfully pull off time after time. Cyndi Lauper was 100% right.
From bullying co-workers to being a shoot piece of trash. I'm Gareth, you're watching What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 dark secrets about WWE legends. Number 10, the Dynamite Kid, shoot trash. The Dynamite Kid was as disgusting in real life, and he was incredible in the ring. Kid was a sociopath, the stories surrounding whom are legion. He relentlessly bullied Jacques Rougeau, and for once, karma came for him. Jacques exploded Kid's face with a roll of quarters sucker punch. In his New Japan days, he he was twice arrested for assaulting teenage fans. In his book Ring of Hell, Matthew Randazzo V revealed that to prove his toughness to the far larger boys in the Stampede territory, the Kid would beat up vagrants, knock out strangers in bars, and take liberties with his opponents in the ring, even going as far as to kick them flush in the head when they were in the process of blading themselves. Lovely. And Tom Billington himself also admitted that as part of a terror campaign against his wife, Michelle, he'd threaten her with murder by placing a shotgun under her chin when she threatened to finally leave a toxic and abusive relationship. Not a nice guy. Number 9, Doink the Clown, typecast. Content warning, alleged sexual assault will be mentioned in this entry. The TV miniseries adaptation of Stephen King's It has aged, but it's still very unsettling in parts. As Pennywise the Dancing Clown, Tim Curry hammed it up. He's Tim Curry and was tremendous value, but he also embodied the sinister, pure evil of the titular monster. In the opening scene, Pennywise appears behind a bedsheet drying on a windy Maine day. It smiles at a young girl. When the sheet flies back up, an expression of pure, dead-eyed malice forms across its face. In that one small moment, ingeniously edited, Curry captures the very essence of wrong desire. Matt Bourne, who originally played Doink the Clown in the WWF across 1992 and 1993, was so effective in the role that he was able to channel the performance of an iconic horror monster. Bourne's Doink was a miserable sack of unsettling trash, with an uncanny ability to locate the camera and stare at it with a foreboding expression, an eerie absence of warmth, joy, anything remotely good. He toyed with the juxtaposition of his look to perfection. I mean, he was incredible in the role, in part because he really was, well, bad news. When he was 25, he appeared in court in Ohio on a 4th-degree felony charge of gross sexual imposition, accused by a 16-year-old girl of molestation in a Reynoldsburg motel. Number 8, Andre the Giant is a massive racist. To this day, Andre the Giant is immortalized by WWE. A titular trophy is contested in his honor every WrestleMania season. Not that the match is anything anybody has ever taken seriously. Don't lie, you couldn't care less about it. He was the subject of the last great wrestling lie. Very few people in the Pontiac Silverdome knew that he'd been slammed before, even by Hulk Hogan himself. And while he was a pure, immobile presence by 1987, Andre in his athletic prime was a phenomenon. He could move, he could go. He was so effective as the unbeatable giant that, to this day, no wrestling promoter since has realized that you can't book a monster for long in the age of endless episodic television. Andre was the perfect act for the perfect time. While he was exceptional at playing a gentle, endearing giant in The Princess Bride, that just underscored how great Andre was as a worker, really. Known to be jovial in many encounters with fans, he apparently did not extend the same courtesy to Bad News Allen. On a 1980 bus ride in Japan, Allen, understandably irate at Andre telling a relentless stream of racist jokes, offered to pull over and fight Andre there and then. Andre refused to fight the Olympic bronze judo medalist, which was probably a wise move. What's the nice? You know what? It's quite a dark list this, so I'm going to try and just add a bit of light right now. I want to know, what is the nicest thing you've ever heard a wrestler do for a fan or a colleague? Let me know in the comments below. A bit of positivity, why not? Number 7, Jake Roberts and his history with animals. Content warning, sexual assault will be mentioned in this entry. Hurts people, hurts people. Those 4 words complicate the true nature of awful behavior and pose virtually unanswerable questions about morality and complicity. Jake Roberts endured a horrific upbringing, the likes of which would test suspension of disbelief in the hackiest soap opera. Jake's father was a monster, as has been covered on Beyond the Mat, Vice's Dark Side of the Ring, and WWE's A&E series. Roberts was the product of the rape of his mother and was sexually abused by his stepmother during childhood. Roberts self-medicated and spent his career and the vast majority of his life in a tragic bid to repel the trauma. He isn't absolved of awful behavior, but it is definitely complicated. More complicated than a listicle can tackle, realistically. Still, Jake Roberts abused a snake through neglect in the early 2000s when living in the UK, for which there is no excuse. Summoned to court in 2004, Roberts was found to have housed the 15-foot animal in a cage spanning just 12 feet. An RSPCA inspector determined that the underweight snake, which died shortly after being seized, had not been fed for 7 to 8 months. That is grim. Number 6, Ted DiBiase did say he likes money. Ted DiBiase was such a fabulous character. He was a booker and writer's dream. The man fueled great storytelling with a motive that was so easy to root against. In his WWF 1980s heyday, his immense wealth and evil intentions threatened to corrupt the sporting integrity of the WWF. And to far lesser effect, his money and quest for power shaped some of the better and underlooked mid-card storylines of the new generation era. In WCW, before Eric Bischoff took it on himself to take over the role, he originally funded the New World Order. This, for a brief time, was one of the most inspired ideas in wrestling history. The role explained how the mercenaries were paid, lending credibility to the entire concept. And DiBiase was connected to the WWF. He was such a cackling, love-to-hate villain with it too. A true icon, one of very few wrestlers that your lapsed friends recall fondly. A character though? Well, yeah, about that. In yet another example of the wrestlers play exaggerated versions of themselves maxim, it was announced in October 2021 by Mississippi State Auditor Shad White's office that DiBiase's Heart of David Ministries had been ordered to repay misappropriated welfare funds as part of a wider embezzlement scandal. Every man has a price. Ted's was $722,299. Oh, while I've got you, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already for more of this fascinating What Culture Wrestling stuff in your day. Number 5, JBL and his love of hazing. JBL apparently matured deep into his run, much too late for how old he was and the extent to which he should have known better. Per the accounts of several of his peers, he was a horrific person to be around, and a lot of the stories told about JBL involve unwanted physical contact. In his book The Hardcore Truth, Bob Holly told the tale of JBL, then working as Bradshaw, drunk from the night before, patting Steve Blackman on the backside at an airport baggage claim. Blackman told JBL to knock it off. Bradshaw persisted. Blackman told JBL that if he did not stop, he'd get his effing teeth knocked out. Bradshaw did not stop and ate a series of jabs to the face. Adam Copeland, in his book Adam Copeland on Edge, confirmed the heavy rumor that JBL would, in an apparent attempt to quote-unquote weed out the prima donnas, join new WWF/E hires and soap up their backsides in the shower. Copeland treated his own incident with a light tone, no knuckles disappeared in his words, and essentially celebrated that he, by going along with it and offering to return the favor, passed the hazing ritual. Again, his words. Still, this could be very fairly described as assault. Nobody should be made to go through things like that, whether they sense what Bradshaw was really attempting to do or otherwise. Palmer Cannon flew himself home and quit the wrestling industry altogether when he was hazed by JBL and Chris Benoit, while Ken Kennedy, in a kayfabe commentary shoot interview, only went as far as to say Palmer was in the bar and a bunch of guys just kind of ganged up on him. Rumors persist that Cannon was duct taped and left to wonder what horror he might endure for the best part of an entire day. Oh, awful stuff. Number 4, Randy Savage and the other allegation. Macho Man Randy Savage is the subject of a vile rumor. You know the one. Many have attempted to connect some dots and will it into existence, but it will not be covered here. Savage was an intensely paranoid individual who channeled his real personality into his best work, effectively method acting throughout the seminal Mega Powers Explode storyline. His belief that Hulk Hogan was out to steal his wife Elizabeth was, in retrospect, all too real. According to George the Animal Steele, Savage, mad with jealousy, would hide Liz away. As Steele would note, there were times when he would lock her in the dressing room. Savage is beloved as the composite 1980s wrestler. If you love the pageantry, silliness, and the techniques, Savage embodied and elevated it all. But it's hard to watch his work back with this and the story of his relationship with WCW valet Gorgeous George, aka Stephanie Bellars, in mind. Speaking to David Penza on his Sitting Ringside podcast, Bellars revealed that Savage initially love-bombed her before he went crazy, and to her disgust, as alleged in a shoot interview with the Hannibal TV, he was so controlling that he made her hide in broom closets to prevent the other boys from making eye contact with her. On the A&E special covering Savage's career, Bellars also claimed that Savage broke into her house and bugged it with cameras and microphones so that he could monitor her activity. While Savage's close association with the Special Olympics indicates that he wasn't entirely a monster, the man definitely had his demons. Number 3, The Ultimate Warrior is a bad man. Where to even begin here? The Ultimate Warrior was an awful human being. Per Bret Hart's book Hitman, the Warrior was once asked to meet a terminally ill child. This bothered the Warrior, whereas every single other wrestler ventured outside of the locker room to greet them. them. When Warrior was asked when he would do the same, the child wearing custom tassels heartbreakingly was there to see his favorite specifically. He apparently roared in a effing minute before never going to the bother. Warrior laughed in a blog entry about the slow, agonizing death of Bobby Heenan, comparing him to a colostomy bag. What did Heenan do? Per Heenan, he took an errant blow to the neck from the Warrior despite expressly asking him to avoid what was an aggravated body part. This continued a pattern of behavior. In a shoot interview, Demolition Smash once claimed that Rick Rude once confronted the Warrior about the exact same thing. When Warrior claimed that he didn't need to ease up because I'm the Warrior, Rude apparently sparked him clean out then and there. Warrior was also outwardly homophobic when he attempted a living doing lectures on the college circuit, and felt no sympathy for the residents of New Orleans following the devastation of Hurricane Katrina, because in his words, their lives were already in ruin. Self-ruin. What a dickhead. Number 2, Hulk Hogan is a bad man. Hulk Hogan could have held onto his legacy forever. He could have walked through the doors of WWE whenever he pleased as a grotesquely paid but actually welcome mascot/ambassador figure. He was never going to work a match at his age, but he could have hosted WrestleMania without getting booed into oblivion. He could have been persuaded into half-heartedly endorsing some guy from NXT whose name he didn't know, botched on the night and forgot about afterwards, and people would have still adored him. He was a doddering old granddad in 2014 and was endearingly bad at WrestleMania 30. He had it made, man. Everyone knew he was a mental fantasist who didn't do anything, but he was the single most nostalgic figure for the millennial fans stuck in the wrestling habit forever. Every time you heard Real American, every memory of WrestleMania 9 and Starrcade 97 just melted away. Well, almost. While it's not exactly classified information, Hogan's abhorrent racism, he was recorded saying that he'd hate it if his daughter dated a black man using the horrific slur. Slightly less known is the fact that he was an absolute a-hole about it afterwards. Speaking on Bill Apter's podcast, Hogan blamed other wrestlers for not forgiving him. They should be better brothers, he said. In Hogan's words, outside the ring, you're supposed to protect your brother. In this case, it's a situation where 75, 80, 90% of the wrestlers are protecting me, and they're giving me another chance to move forward. There's just a few wrestlers that kind of don't understand the bond and the brotherhood of wrestling. If someone makes a mistake, you need to forgive them and move on and try to let them prove themselves. Translated, if you were ever trained, you're not allowed to think I'm an asshole. Number 1, Paul Heyman's approach to business. Paul Heyman won. In professional wrestling, carnies tend to do that. He revolutionized the industry in the 1990s. His 1994-95 ECW product was intoxicating, transformative, as cool as pro wrestling gets. And both WCW and the WWF flourished by stealing his talent and philosophy. The medium would look radically different, and one could argue far smaller were it not for his influence, folks. In addition to that artistic legacy and the street cred, he's also made it mainstream as the advocate and the wise man. He is, well, part of the furniture now, and that is wild considering he was on abysmal terms with WWE twice historically. He will go down as one of the most memorable characters in the history of the promotion, can retire comfortably several times over, and his creative sparked WWE's resurgence. Everybody told WWE that he was the key. WWE didn't listen in 2002 nor 2006, but when they did, Heyman brought the good times back. He was also, depending on who you talk to, an evil piece of remorseless, self-involved garbage. As recounted on Dark Side of the Ring, he exploited Chris Candido and Sonny's struggles with addiction, asking Sonny to do another take of her very real confession that she wanted to die. Heyman used Candido's credit card to book flights for the ECW roster, which scorched the credit rating, and money issues haunted Candido for the remainder of his young, tragic life. And his Wrestling Observer newsletter obituary makes for particularly harrowing reading in light of that story. A wise man, sure, but not always a nice man.
All it took for WWE to sit atop the wealth mountain right now were a series of conversations that helped reshape the industry forever. That's also true for various other major figures, promotions, and wrestlers inside the wrestling sphere. Things could honestly be so very different. So with that in mind, I'm Gareth from What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 secret conversations that changed wrestling history forever. Number 10, Cody and the Bucks discuss Dave Meltzer's words. Wrestling Observer chief Dave Meltzer couldn't have known the flames he was fanning when he said that ROH would never shift 10,000 tickets for one of their shows. That, according to Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks, got got the friends who all worked for the company talking. That led to the birth of AEW. The threesome produced their own all-in event on the 1st of September 2018, first of course, and the success of that made Meltzer eat his words. No, Ring of Honor hadn't shifted 10,000 briefs, but some of the group's top talents had, and that must have felt great. After that, Cody and the Bucks pondered more. That's when Tony Khan and family came into the picture. Who knows if All Elite would even be a thing had Meltzer not fired out an accidental challenge to guys who were hungry to prove him wrong. There is a chance that Cody, the Bucks, or a combo of indie workers might have tried running their own company, but shooting the stuff about Dave's comments here ultimately led to bigger things. Number 9, we're starting on top of the cell. Bruce Pritchard was appalled when he heard from Mick Foley that he and The Undertaker planned to start their Hell in a Cell stunt show on top of the cage. That was breaking new ground for the match type, and Pritchard wondered if it had ruined the entire point of having a roof structure in the first place. Foley didn't care though. He had something huge in mind. That passive conversation with one of the WWF's top creative minds changed the course of Hell in a Cell history for good. After Mick's huge bumps off and through the cage, the latter of which was something he hadn't planned, fans expected massive stunts whenever the gimmick was scheduled. When was the last truly great Cell match though? It is an interesting question, to be honest, because most today can't hope to live up to or top what Taker and Mankind achieved at King of the Ring 1998. That may not be the case had they not agreed to start on top. And while I've got you here, what's your favourite Hell in a Cell bout outside of this particular classic? Let me know in the comments section down below. Number 8, Bret Hart talks to WCW in 1992. Bret Hart bagged his first WWF World title from Ric Flair on the 12th of October 1992. Before that, he was secretly negotiating with WCW about jumping over to work there, but couldn't come to an agreement on money with then senior management Jim Barnett. Barnett actually told the Hitman to stay put over the phone. Although Hart was the reigning Intercontinental Champion at the time these talks took place, he wasn't sure how seriously Vince McMahon would take him as a headliner. In fact, Bret wasn't even sure Vince viewed him as someone deserving of a push at all. He was willing to take more money in WCW and try his luck there. Barnett stepped in to dismiss what others in WCW were telling the Canadian. They couldn't actually pay him the cash he was looking for, and that eventually changed Hart's mind. He decided to stay in the WWF. Vince then told him he'd be champ later that year, and they all lived happily ever after. Wait. Number 7, The Undertaker tells Vince McMahon he's done. On WWE's Last Ride documentary series, The Undertaker was shown chatting with Vince McMahon after his tag team match at Extreme Rules 2019. Despite being pleased with how the bout had gone, Taker suddenly told his gaffer that he was done and would probably be hanging up the tights. McMahon told him, "I will follow your lead." Extreme Rules didn't end up being The Undertaker's final match, of course, but it was a sign that the icon was mentally prepared to call it a career almost 30 years deep. He'd wrestle one more time in a cinematic boneyard brawl against AJ Styles at WrestleMania 36, before announcing on the Doc's finale that he was retiring. As the Usos and the Revival worked a tag match out in the ring, Taker told Vince behind the curtain at Gorilla that he was likely moving on from this chapter of his life, and nobody knew that conversation had even taken place at the time, aside from them and the camera crew. Number 6, Ted Turner gives Eric Bischoff Monday nights. In mid-1995, Eric Bischoff strolled nervously into Ted Turner's office and braced himself for a verbal volley of vitriol. A triple V, if you will. He planned to pitch that WCW programming strike up a deal with China's Star Network. The problem? That network was owned and operated by sworn Turner enemy Rupert Murdoch. Bish didn't even get that far into the pitch though. After a few minutes of setting the scene, Ted interrupted him and boldly asked, "What do we need to do to compete with Vince McMahon?" Stunned by the question, Eric blurted out that he needed to go head to head with him. That's when Turner told his executives to give WCW 2 primetime hours every Monday night. Boom! Nitro was born, and it did eventually debut that September. Bischoff didn't divulge details on this face-to-face with Ted until years later, but he recognizes how pivotal it was in changing the wrestling landscape forever. The Monday Night Wars had very much begun. Number 5, Eric Bischoff convinces Hulk Hogan to turn heel. 1995 was notable for another reason too. Towards the end of the year, Bischoff started talking to Hulk Hogan about the possibility possibility of freshening up his act and trying something different. By 1996, polite talks had switched into full-blown pitches for Hogan to turn heel. Eric had the perfect gig for him. Hulk would be the leader of the new heel faction known as the New World Order. Whilst all this was going on behind the scenes, Hogan continued playing his classic babyface character in front of fans. Few knew what the real plan was, or that Hulk was pacing around his house wondering if going rogue might destroy everything he had built since the mid-80s. This was the hardest decision he had ever been asked to make. Bischoff got his way at the 11th hour when Hogan finally made up his mind and agreed to become the NWO's focal point. His heel turn shook the foundations of WCW as well as the entire wrestling industry, prolonged Hulk's career and helped the company become number 1. Number 4, Jamie Kelner cancels WCW programming. It wasn't Hulk Hogan, Eric Bischoff, or even Ted Turner who made the biggest call in WCW's history though. It was a television executive nobody had even heard of. Jamie Kelner was the one who decided that company programming would no longer air on Turner's own networks in 2001. Without TV, the company was effectively defunct. Kellner's move opened the door for Vince McMahon to purchase the remnants of a promotion that had once kicked his ass all over the United States. For the paltry sum of $2.5 million, McMahon received WCW's tape library, numerous trademarks, and over 20 talent contracts he could use to bolster the ranks on his own shows. A random board meeting amongst Turner top brass altered the course of wrestling history for good. WCW didn't mean much to Kelner or his associates, it arguably never did to be honest, and they were sick and tired of the money pit it had become, so they put a pen through it and moved on. Number 3, Howard Finkele names WrestleMania. The brand name WrestleMania has become synonymous with pomp, circumstance, and endless explosion of fireworks and excitement. It's by far the biggest show on WWE's calendar every single year. It is hard to see it still being around as a respected thriller. Had original plans to call the show the Colossal Tussle prevailed though. That, believe it or not, was the first name proposed for Mania, and it didn't change until someone said something to the effect of, that sucks, how about calling it WrestleMania instead? That someone was Howard Finkele. Bruce Pritchard once revealed on his podcast that the Fink was the one who named WWE's iconic annual masterpiece. Without his intervention and willingness to speak up one day, Vince McMahon might have went with the Colossal Tussle, and yours truly probably wouldn't be talking about wrestling right this very second. Number 2, the plan to screw Bret Hart. This one wouldn't have happened had Bret bolted to WCW back in 1992, of course. He didn't though, and instead went on to become a linchpin of the WWF's main event mix. Hart's influence would grow to the extent that he was one of Vince McMahon's most trusted lieutenants. Then Vince reneged on a bumper new deal with Bret, said he couldn't afford it, and that pissed Hart off to the point that he decided WCW's money should be his instead. At that point, things turned a bit ugly. Bret, who had a fractured relationship with Shawn Michaels, told Vince he would not drop the WWF title to him in Canada. That worried McMahon because it meant Hart could theoretically appear on WCW TV with his top title. He could not let that happen, so he called a meeting. Vince, Michaels, Triple H, and possibly a few others conspired to screw Hart out of the belt at Survivor Series 1997. Yes, the screw job has been chronicled endlessly, but it still deserves a spot on this list. The secret conversations Vince had with HBK and others pushed Hart out, birthed the Mr. McMahon character, and had an absolutely huge knock-on effect generally. And number 1, Vince McMahon Sr. sells to his son. Vince McMahon Jr., and he reportedly hates the junior tag, but it's a bit necessary here, founded Titan Sports in 1980. 2 years later, he acquired the World Wrestling Federation from his father and set about ruthlessly expanding throughout the US and eventually globally over the next decade. Vince Sr. could not have known during those conversations about Vince Jr. assuming control of the entire company that his boy would ignore traditions, break new ground, and revolutionize the pro wrestling industry. Hell, there's a chance Sr. might not have given Jr. complete power had he known the extent of his plans. Vince the younger wanted to monopolize, and he did not care who he had to trample over to get there. That was just the way it was. He smelled opportunity and he was going to grasp it regardless of what anyone said. Who honestly knows how different things would be had Sr. actually said, "No chance in hell, son," and decided to sell up to someone outside of the family. A McMahonless wrestling business. Imagine that. As this list will show, wrestling's biggest company has a long and spiteful history of belittling and endangering its employees to satisfy the often cruel whims of the people in charge. I am Gareth here from What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 horribly cruel WWE moments worse when you know the truth. Number 10, WWE motivate Jeff Hardy with pictures of his dead dog. Considering how much of wrestling is based on psychology and crowd manipulation, WWE's higher-ups often show a surprising lack of awareness for how the average human thinks. What Culture alone have spent a lot of time talking about the infamous Matt and Jeff Hardy 2009 feud, which cut uncomfortably close to the bone. Matt was understandably uncomfortable about having to claim responsibility for the real-life house fire that claimed the life of Jeff's dog, Jack. But it gets worse when you learn how WWE tried to use the tragedy to motivate Jeff for a promo. As reported by Sportskeeda, Jeff revealed on the podcast Wrestling with Freddie that WWE commissioned a video package which prominently featured Jeff's deceased pet. As Jeff put it, company officials told him this was done to get Jeff fired up. Itself an unfortunate choice of words, but it had the exact opposite effect. Because of course it did. Rather than filling Jeff with righteous fury, seeing a video of his beloved former pet just bummed him out. It beggars belief that WWE genuinely thought showing Jeff a video of his recently killed dog would do anything other than depress him. Idiots. Number 9. WWE humiliates, bully and fire Mickie James based on her looks. The Mickie James debacle has long been an exemplar of why the Divas division is seen as a low point in WWE history. The legendary Mickie James spent months being bullied by Michelle McCool and Layla over her weight, as the duo tormented Mickie for reasons that were patently false to anyone with a functioning set of eyes. Everyone involved hated the angle, surprise surprise, but it just kept going. Even worse, the heels wound up winning the feud, with Mickie's sole title victory over Michelle McCool being rendered redundant when the latter won the belt back less than a month later. Mickie would later be fired less than 2 months after dropping the belt, eventually revealing that she was told the company was moving the women's division in a new direction. Sadly for women's wrestling, said direction was based solely on how many fashion models John Laurinaitis could get his skeevy little hands on. Number 8. WWE referenced Reed Flairs' suicide without telling his immediate family. Staying on the subject of atrocious Divas division angles, we come to one of the most jaw-droppingly callous segments in WWE history. In 2015, Paige and Charlotte were embroiled in a feud for the Divas title, as the company finally injected the floundering division with much-needed talent. Unfortunately, the feud ended up being overwhelmed by the inexplicable decision to have Paige reference the tragic suicide of Reed Flair, Charlotte's brother. As eye-poppingly insensitive as the comment was, you'd expect WWE to have received permission from Reed's immediate family to use his suicide as storyline fodder, or at the very least to get in touch with them ahead of time to inform them Reed's death would be referred to on Raw. Sadly, that was just not the case. Reed's mother, Elizabeth, found out about the comment the same time as the rest of the bloody world, and let her feelings be known in a tweet that blasted the company as lazy and disrespectful. Suicide is an extraordinarily heavy subject for a wrestling program to deal with, and WWE using it for cheap heat shows the rotten state the company was in at the time. Number 7. The locker room turn on Hassan for disrespecting Eddie Guerrero even though Eddie didn't care. While WWE has had its share of outcasts over the years, few have amassed the staggering level of vitriol Muhammad Hassan accumulated in the 8 months he spent on the company roster. The nadir came when Hassan, under the advice of Kurt Angle, asked Eddie Guerrero to stop using the camel clutch, as it was Hassan's finisher. Unfortunately, the young rookie didn't realize Eddie's father was the man who had actually invented this move. While the aftermath of the incident is well known, Hassan wound up paying a $2,000 bar tab for the entire locker room as punishment. What usually gets swept under the rug is that Eddie himself wasn't angered by Muhammad's blunder at all. Per Fightful, Hassan explained that Eddie himself was extremely professional over the whole situation, as he realized the younger wrestler had been put in a bad spot through Kurt's bogus advice. He said the conversation ended with a hug, which makes the rest of the locker room's subsequent overreaction even more jarring. Hassan may have been removed from TV following his infamous terrorist angle with The Undertaker, but that was only the final nail in the coffin his peers had built for him. Number 6. Lita was told she'd be fired if she didn't take part in the live sex celebration. When Bret Hart described professional wrestling in his biography as two athletes telling a story with their bodies, I doubt he had Lita and Edge's notorious live sex celebration in mind. Both performers have since gone on record to describe their understandable discomfort with the segment, but unsurprisingly, it was the female half of the duo who came under the most fire from WWE management for airing her displeasure at the time. Back in 2021, Lita claimed on her Twitch channel that Vince McMahon was hot to trot for the segment, and that saying no was just not an option. When Lita voiced her trepidation at the idea of going all the way on live television, she was threatened with her release. Vince clearly has all the moral conscience of an abattoir, and if his employees didn't follow his every whim, he had and likely still has no problem sending them straight into the disassembly line. Was this the most shocking segment in Monday Night Raw history? If not, what was? Let me know in the comment section down below. Number 5, DX mocked Chris Masters for losing weight after he went to rehab. When Chris Masters took time off TV in 2006, he returned looking notably leaner than before his absence. This fact didn't go unnoticed by Triple H, who upon hearing Chris was thinking about writing a book on nutrition, smarmily replied, "Really, what's it gonna be called? How to lose 50 pounds of muscle in 4 weeks?" In an interview with Power Slam magazine, Masters took the high road and said Triple H was an equal opportunity ballbuster. Unfortunately, as interviewer Greg Lambert noted, given the events surrounding the younger wrestler's leave of absence, Triple H's joke came across as extremely tone-deaf. Chris Masters had actually been in rehab, struggling to overcome an addiction to prescription pills that had ballooned to the point he was taking 75 painkillers a day. Masters explained that the weight loss came from the 2 miles of running he did every day as part of his therapy, and the relative lack of weight training that came with giving his overstressed muscles a break. Given that WWE had just implemented the wellness policy earlier that year, openly mocking one of its beneficiaries on live television wasn't the smartest move Triple H could have made. Number 4, Natalya gets squashed on pay-per-view on her birthday. On the surface, having Natalya be Rhea Ripley's opponent at Night of Champions was a sound decision. Natalya may not have had a hope of winning, but WWE giving her a chance to strut her stuff on a big stage seemed like a nice birthday present for one of the company's longest-serving performers. Then the match happened, and well, the following is a blow-by-blow account of the entire bout. Number 1, Rhea attacks Natalya while the latter is distracted by Dominic. Number 2, Rhea boots Natalya out the ring. Number 3, Rhea slams Natalya into an announce table. Number 4, Rhea slams Natalya into an announce table again. Number 5, Rhea slams Natalya into an announce table again. Number 6, Rhea throws Natalya into the ring steps. Number 7, Rhea throws Natalya into another set of ring steps. Number 8, Rhea rolls Natalya back into the ring. Number 9, Rhea headbutts Natalya. Number 10, Rhea hits the riptide and pins Natalya. And there you have it, a simple 10-step 70-second guide on how to give a 16-year company veteran the worst birthday ever. Number 3, the British Bulldog has his already ruined back slammed into dog turds to pop the boss. The British Bulldog's final run in WWE was a sad sight to see. Prior to leaving the company following the Montreal Screwjob, Bulldog had been in the form of his life. He'd spent the previous year having absolute bangers with legendary workers like Owen and Bret Hart, but he returned to WWE in 1999 a shell of his former self. Tragically, while working in WCW, the British Bulldog suffered a horrendous spinal injury that put him in the hospital for 6 months. Even worse, it kick-started an addiction to painkillers and morphine in the lead up to his sudden death in 2002. Knowing the state Bulldog's ravaged back was in, it's even harder to watch the ill-advised segment where Davey Boy was slammed back first into a pile of dog poop. According to longtime WWE staffer Bruce Pritchard, the only reason this angle happened was because in Vince McMahon's mind, there's nothing funnier than dog crap. Watching the British Bulldog taking back bumps during this period, knowing the state his body was in and where it would ultimately lead, is already uncomfortable. Watching him be humiliated at the same time because of his a-hole boss is infuriating. Number 2, Shawn Michaels beats the British Bulldog in his hometown in front of his dying sister. It cannot be overstated what an utter prick Shawn Michaels was in the 90s. From sleeping with his co-worker's girlfriend to acting like a prima donna in and outside of the ring, Michaels' reputation for obnoxious behavior was well earned. Sadly, one evening in Britain saw the superstar's natural selfishness transmogrify into something truly evil. The British Bulldog was all set to defend his European Championship against Shawn at one night only, a pay-per-view held in Bulldog's home country of Britain. Having been told he was going over, Davey Boy dedicated the match to his sister Tracy, hoping to give her something to cheer about while she was battling cancer that would ultimately claim her life. Unfortunately, Shawn had other ideas. Shawn convinced WWE higher-ups to change plans and put the belt on him. The allure of becoming a Grand Slam champion and screwing over his perennial nemesis Bret Hart, Bulldog's brother-in-law, proving too great a temptation for the egomaniacal wrestler to resist. WWE, as they did all too often with Shawn, relented, and the end result was one of the most depressing conclusions in pay-per-view history. Number 1, $5,000 is deemed too expensive to safeguard Owen Hart's life. As detailed by John Pollock, WWE got into an argument with rigger Joe Branham about the cost of the stunt that ultimately cost Owen Hart his life at Over the Edge 1999. Due to WWE's insistence in allowing a quick release function, so Owen could take a comedy pratfall immediately after landing in the ring, Branham quoted them at $5,000. WWE responded by firing Branham and doing the stunt on the cheap, leading to the fateful events of May 23, 1999. $5,000 was seen as too much to protect Owen Hart. Hart, one of the greatest, most loved wrestlers to ever enter the business. $5,000 was seen as too much to ensure Owen's wife would be able to grow old with her husband, and their children would grow up with their father. The death of Owen Hart is the greatest tragedy to ever occur in a WWE ring. The fact that it was also the most easily avoidable makes it all the more devastating. The second you become aware of the specific ways everything from the best in the world and the best there is, was, and ever will be, to some of the most talented women in the business and a certain scary movie are connected, you'll likely never be able to unsee it. So let's dive in, baby! Because I am Gareth, this is What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 fascinating secret wrestling connections you definitely missed. Number 10, Swerve Strickland's easily missed Bray Wyatt tribute. The entire wrestling community joined together to salute and pay respect to the taken too soon Bray Wyatt back in August. But not every tribute came in the form of an emotional promo or message on social media. Some folks, like the always impressive Swerve Strickland, actually waited a few months to pay homage to the late great Wyatt, with the future world champion adding some fiendish flavor to his gear on the night of Full Gear 2023. Many naturally weren't quick to spot the Wyatt connection on the night, as Strickland and Hangman Page attempted to beat each other to a bloody pulp in one of the most horrific bouts of the year. But Strickland would eventually confirm via Instagram that his tights on the night were very much inspired by a star he had always loved and been influenced by. Swerve would even note on the Not Sam Wrestling podcast that while sharing a locker room with Wyatt back in WWE, he actually helped the creative performer with a Fiend mask at one point, and he wasn't the only performer to secretly pay tribute with a cool Wyatt connection on screen. Number 9, Rey Mysterio's secret homage to Bray Wyatt. As already mentioned, performers all across the industry remembered the beloved Bray Wyatt in their own way in the wake of his tragic passing. And on the August 25th edition of SmackDown, a show dedicated to both the former WWE champion and the late Terry Funk, a certain masked legend opted to secretly pay homage to one of his former in-ring adversaries during a match against Grayson Waller. A few fans online did actually manage to catch the marvelous Wyatt connection felt during one specific sequence in the bout, with Rey Mysterio nailing his young rival with Bray's trademark clothesline/senton combo. Being the absolutely world-class performer he still is even at almost 50 years old, Ray absolutely nailed the subtle move tribute, of course, but the rather moving collection of attacks was sadly overlooked by most on an emotional night full of respectful nods, promos, and other tributes to both the extraordinary Wyatt and Funk. And while on the subject of both of those legends, you let me know right now in the comment section down below what your favorite Bray Wyatt and Terry Funk moments were. Number 8, the Scary Movie 3 moment during Bianca Belair versus Alexa Bliss. The wrestling and movie businesses have been connected in a number of terrific ways over the years. Studios have unleashed various engaging, dramatic, and rather entertaining biopics focused on this bizarre world, and folks taking bumps inside of the squared circle have often taken inspiration from big screen characters and even specific scenes. Take Bianca Belair's January 2nd, 2023 Raw battle with Alexa Bliss, for example. Those who hadn't ever sat through the third installment in the horror parody delight that is the Scary Movie series likely didn't spot the subtle nod to the flick during this Raw Women's Championship fight. But as Belair herself would explain to Cage Side Seats that same month, the champ keeping her challenger at arm's length and more were an entirely intentional tip of the cap to Regina Hall and her character's fight with another spooky figure in the movie. After watching that hilarious clip of Brenda Meeks whooping all the ass with her wind-up punch and other comical maneuvers, Belair thought the potential was there for a Scary Movie connection to be chucked into her moment with Bliss. It worked a treat and likely acted as a fun little Easter egg for fans of the silly franchise. Yes, wrestling is silly too. Number 7, Sami Gavara's gear secretly foreshadows a turn. Before the Spanish God finally collided with his longtime mentor Chris Jericho, Excalibur made a point of noting how Sami Guevara had opted to wear gear similar to the outfit Y2J had worn during his WrestleMania 19 match with Shawn Michaels. Why? Because Guevara was as inspired by Jericho as Jericho was by HBK, of course. And while that specific connection was openly explained to the audience before the pair had even locked up, what many didn't spot even after it had shockingly occurred post-match was how that gear secretly connected Guevara to the bloke he would ultimately nail in the balls. You see, after failing to defeat Michaels at that show of shows 20 years earlier, Jericho also suddenly pulverized his inspiration's nuts. Fast forward 2 decades, and Guevara pretty much told you before a single punch had been thrown that a similarly explosive ending was on the horizon. And sure enough, after also losing and initially sharing a hug with his Grand Slam opponent, Sami established his secret connection with Jericho via low blow. Number 6, AJ Styles wrestled in both The Undertaker and Randy Savage's last matches. How's that for a phenomenal connection, eh? Apologies for that. But you can bet that AJ Styles wouldn't have guessed he'd end up being involved in not one, but two wrestling icons' final ever matches in the business. 16 years before warring with a dead man in a surreal boneyard fight at WrestleMania 36, the former WWE and TNA champion actually took part in the Macho Man's last ever contest too. Going down at TNA's 2004 Turning Point event, Styles teamed with Jeff Hardy and Randy Savage in a 6-person tag contest against the all-star lineup of Jeff Jarrett, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. Michael Hamflett's dream team, in other words. Admittedly, Macho Man was involved in the match for all of about 2 minutes after being kidnapped by the Kings of Wrestling earlier in the evening. But when he did finally rock up, it wasn't long before Savage and co had taken home the W. Savage would exit the company not long after, ultimately making this the last match of his historic career. Fast forward to April 4, 2020, and Styles was once again working with a legend in a match nobody honestly knew would be their last ever at the time. But after Taker confirmed his retirement a few months later, that cinematic match eventually became his final one. What a strange old life, eh? Oh yeah, and cheers for watching today, and if you like what you see, then tap on that subscribe button down below. Number 5, when Adam Copeland throws on the hardcore vest, things get hot. The rated R superstar is a bloke who never misses an opportunity to add some glorious detail to his work. And if you were paying close attention to the gear Adam Copeland sported during his recent TNT Championship war with longtime pal/rival Christian Cage, you may have been able to spot a magnificent connection that secretly foreshadowed the match's fiery conclusion. That specific vest and trouser combo Copeland donned for his World's End fight with AEW's Patriarch was actually the same one he chose for his iconic WrestleMania 22 hardcore match with Mick Foley all those years ago. Man, I wore out that DVD. No one will ever forget the horrifying visual of Mrs. Foley's baby boy being speared through a blazing table at ringside that night. And what do you know? Something rather similar went down during the last AEW pay-per-view of 2023. Instead of being knocked off the apron and through the burning wood here though, Nick Wayne would end up getting powerbombed onto the table late on. But oh no, not through it. Instead taking a pretty awkward neck-first bump onto the floor. Yep, it was pretty nasty. Copeland had a few folks online fired up for a burning table spot from the second he strutted out onto the ramp, but many were too caught up in the violence to spot this fantastic detail. Number 4, if it wasn't for the bionic elbow, there'd be no People's Elbow. Long before he was on the verge of potentially delaying his son's never-ending story, The Rock took inspiration from the mighty Dusty Rhodes. The People's Champion would note on Instagram in the wake of Dusty's passing in July 2015 that not only did Rhodes inspire and mentor him over the years, he also helped inspire him to create his own super entertaining elbow of destruction after admiring the bionic elbow growing up. Now sure, Rhodes' elbow may have been delivered while standing up, whereas The Rock saw the Great One crash his down on arrival after running the ropes. But the theatrical setup and end result of the crowd losing their minds were both similarly electric. Number 3, when Reigns vs Lesnar main events Mania, Royal Rumble winners tend to lose. WWE fans aren't the only ones hoping they don't have to sit through a 4th Roman Reigns vs Brock Lesnar WrestleMania main event in the coming years. Royal Rumble winners are fearing a show of shows forquel too. That's because whenever the Tribal Chief and the Beast Incarnate force their way into the show closing slot on the grandest stage, the unfortunate soul who worked their ass off to win the 30-person over-the-top rope spectacular doesn't end up lifting the big one at Mania. First, it was Reigns himself who failed to walk away with the gold in 2015 at Mania 31 after his match with the big bad Brock, and later Seth Rollins. Then both Shinsuke Nakamura and Asuka weren't able to conquer AJ Styles and Charlotte Flair respectively when Roman and Brock closed out WrestleMania 34. And finally, 2022 saw both Ronda Rousey and her fellow former UFC champion pick up L's at the Showcase of the Immortals, losing to the Queen and the head of the table at WrestleMania 38, as the latter match once again went on last on night 2. Put simply, if these two ever decide there's still some unfinished WrestleMania business between them, pray for that year's Royal Rumble winners. Number 2, Sheamus and Jeff Hardy are somehow the same age. Admittedly, it does sometimes feel like both of these popular lads have been around for an eternity, but it does still seem a little odd to note that one-time piss-test enemies Sheamus and Jeff Hardy are actually the same age, with Hardy in particular being present on fan screens from as far back as 1994, the year I was born. You'd be forgiven for assuming the charismatic enigma was at least a few years older than the Celtic warrior. However, it is worth remembering that Jeff was actually just 16 years old at the time of his first WWE on-screen appearance versus Razor Ramon, meaning that he's now been active for a whopping 3 decades. And so have I. Sheamus, on the other other hand, only debuted as a wrestler back in 2002 before finally arriving on the WWE roster in 2009. That and the fact the still capable of a banger Irish machine hasn't thrown himself off of quite as many ladders as the now rather battered Jeff over the decades is likely the reason many wouldn't be quick to suggest the two former WWE champions are connected via their shared age. But you better believe it, folks. Number 1, hell froze over for CM Punk and Bret Hart. It's no secret that the punker is a massive Hitman stan. Hell, he even hilariously donned a Bret Hart hoodie for his recent NXT appearance opposite Bret Hart's one-time bitter rival Shawn Michaels. But there was a far more subtle nod to the majestic legend that many understandably overlooked during CM Punk's WWE homecoming. Back when the Best in the World appeared on Monday Night Raw for the first time in nearly a decade on November 27, 2023, Punk made a point of delivering some very specific words during his first promo back. Looks like hell froze over was the statement uttered by one Bill Phil that night, and before it ended up on the front of his latest piece of WWE merch, that was actually something Hart told audiences during his first appearance on Raw in over 12 years back in 2010 too. As he soaked in a hot response just like the one Punk received during his long-awaited comeback, the WWE Hall of Famer noted, well, I guess hell froze over. Both legends infamously left WWE on bad terms, and ultimately came back around a decade or so after the drama. A clever Punk clearly spotted the similarities, and could not resist adding in a secret Hart connection to his once unthinkable return. They don't call him the best in the world for nothing, my friends.
If you are hoping for an instant example as to what we're talking about with a retcon, I'll throw a name at you. Kane. This guy went from a dude who couldn't even talk to a drink-driving maniac who apparently was into dead bodies. It's quite the evolution, or devolution I suppose. It was terrible. There was also Edge and Christian who were literal brothers for a while until we just forgot about that. So let's sit down and grab our cups of cocoa and get into 10 of the best. Number 10, Charlotte Flair's NXT title reigns. If we do go back a few years, Charlotte was on Steve Austin's podcast and called herself a 13-time champion. Now this sent the internet crazy because literally weeks before this, WWE had shown a graphic on TV saying she was a 12-time champion. Who is lying to us? If we do sit down and figure it out, it's more like 15, because there were 6 with the old women's Raw belt, 7 as SmackDown Women's Champion, and she was NXT champ twice. That's 15. Don't hurt my brain. As it turned out, for some reason, we didn't care about NXT, so just deleted those. And as one of her Raw runs was when she held the Divas title, I do think we got rid of that too. It's also confusing. It is 2 + 2 = a potato. I mean, things happen, can't just pretend they didn't. Number 9, the first ever WWF Steel Cage World title match. One of the main events of WrestleMania 2 was King Kong Bundy versus Hulk Hogan in a cage. To pick this up, the WWF sold it as the first time ever we'd seen the world title defended in the steel. And yes, this wasn't true. And sure, if you want to get specific, Hulk and Bundy had never done this before, but that's not what we were saying. The idea was to get you hyped about the first championship steel cage match in history, and yet we'd already done it before. Because back in 1982, Bob Backlund had done this thing at MSG when he took on Jimmy Snuka. Plus, you could watch that on TV. It's not like it was secluded for a live crowd. Just to make it more ridiculous, Bob had also done this a few weeks prior against superstar Billy Graham. Whatever sells a pay-per-view, I suppose. But my word, this was dumb. Number 8, Snitsky is undefeated. So here is a weird tie-in. I worked with Gene Snitsky on the Last Match musical recently. He even punted a fake baby as a tribute. What a world. The word undefeated is often branded around in wrestling though, and in 2007 it was for one Gene Snitsky. He had moved to Raw from ECW as we yelled that he hadn't lost, despite the fact we'd just seen him be defeated by Rob Van Dam via DQ. Please do not worry about that though. The commentary then began yelling that Snitsky couldn't be beaten as he ran through the likes of Val Venus and Super Crazy and squash matches. And this was all done for one big reason. The WWE wanted to pitch him as a threat against John Cena. This all happened too when Cena got the W, but of course it was via disqualification, so we're back here again. At least that popped the bubble because we couldn't go back now, and really we all know what was happening here. WWE didn't care about ECW. I mean, you could see that when you watched it. Number 7, the Big Boss Man's history. When the Boss Man first debuted, he was meant to be a nasty corrections officer who would routinely beat his inmates. That is not cool. From nowhere, he then discovered that the $1 Million Man was channeling funds illegally, so stopped that as he was a cop, and we all cheered. What about his behavior before all this though? Well, I have the answer. Flub you, don't worry about it. It also meant that when Nails arrived on Raw to start this feud, he was in the right. He was one of these prisoners who had been whooped by a policeman, so he had just cause to be mad. The point was, Vince McMahon had decided the boss man should be a babyface, so please don't think about this other stuff. In fact, look at that nice pony over there. We all listened as well, and looked at that horse. More fool us. The 6th, the McMahon Helmsley wedding. This was the original story, and don't get mad at me. I'm with you. It was bonkers. But in 1999, Triple H had seemingly drugged Stephanie in order to marry her, before it was revealed they were actually together, and they were going to whoop Vince McMahon's ass. In 2002, they then got a storyline divorce to tie into that year's Mania, when we got to 2003, and they wed for real. I hope you're keeping up with this. Because this wasn't part of the narrative though, and WWE wanted to use it. We just forgot anything that had happened before all this, and acted like they just got married. What the hell is happening? Since this moment too, 2003 has always been used as the date of their marriage, even though on screen, they hitched up 4 years earlier. This is when the merging of the narrative and reality goes totally off the rails. Although I do get this, however. Which would you pick given the circumstances? Exactly. Number 5, The Big Show is Stephanie's childhood hero. Stephanie McMahon was born on the 24th of September 1976. Paul White, on the other hand, came into this world on the 8th of February 1972, so there's roughly 4 years between them. It's why when Steph walked out onto TV in 2013 and said The Big Show was her childhood hero, people were confused. It would mean she was a child of his when he was a kid. The lines got blurrier as we sold this as McMahon's seeing show as the second coming of Andre the Giant, which was her actual favorite as a kid. So why don't you just say that? There was a horrible edge to this as we were essentially gaslighting The Big Show to do the authorities' bidding, but if you were into maths, by the time White debuted in WCW, Stephanie was a teenager. And sure, maybe this was the trick, but shouldn't the flipping Big Show have been able to work it out? I did, and I'm stupid. As we have touched on both, let's throw this in there too. WCW pretended that the Giant was Andre's son. Good gosh. Number 4, who really created the Elimination Chamber? Today there is only one man credited with the building of the Elimination Chamber, Triple H. It was his nod to WCW's War Games, but here we go again. Let's return to 2002 as that goes against everything we just said. For the then Raw GM was Eric Bischoff, and as we headed into that year's Survivor Series, he had to come up with a horrible idea, and he did, the Chamber. He sold it like it was going to be the next Raw Rumble or Hell in a Cell to get people interested, so you can't miss this, especially because the world title was going to be put on the line. Now, of course, this was our on-screen story, but that's the point of this list. As soon as Eric wasn't part of the company anymore and Hunter was the man, we switched gears. Now it was the game that made this, and don't say otherwise. I don't think we even mentioned Eric and the Chamber together anymore, and we'll probably never show a video clip again. That is history done and dusted. Number 3, the first time ever WrestleMania match. So if you watch any of my stuff, you will have heard me moan about this before. This one drives me nuts. Because back in 2011, we had that cool segment when Triple H and The Undertaker stared off and made a WrestleMania match without saying a word. It worked. We could have just left it there as people were pumped for this, but no. We started selling it as the first time clash at the show of shows, just forgetting what had happened at WrestleMania 17. That's right, that match was really good too, although WWE is to blame. The rumor has always been that they finished the card for that event and realized Triple H and Taker weren't booked, so just throw them together. As time has gone on too, this 2001 clash has just been downplayed, so it basically doesn't exist, so we must keep it alive. I really like this fight. Why the hell are we trying to bury it? Number 2, Vince gets the F out. The Ruthless Aggression Era network documentary that was launched in 2020 is a fun watch. It does muck around with history, but they always do that. You gotta take it with a pinch of salt. The absolute clanger, however, was when we said Vince McMahon changed the name of the company from the WWF to WWE in 2002 because it was time to go in a new direction. That is categorically not true. The real situation, as it was covered in the news, was that the World Wrestling Federation had violated their agreement with the World Wildlife Fund, got sued and had to make a shift. That's what happened. It was on the BBC. The only reason we did the Get the F Out campaign is because there was no other choice, and trying to spin that one is way too far. Just don't say anything. It takes one Google, and if I were the Pandas, I would kick off again. They did nothing wrong, and they got dragged through the mud for a second damn time. Number 1, the original NWO logo. This is a blink and miss it moment because as Kevin Nash and Scott Hall were running wild over WCW in 1996, they did indeed get Hulk Hogan on board and form the NWO, and then it was carnage. I think a lot of this may have been decided as we went too, because the first logo was a giant N, a giant W with a big O surrounding the two. So really it looked like ONW, That doesn't sound as good. It certainly wasn't edgy and looked like something you'd see on the news when thankfully it did get changed. This was so fast nobody remembered it, even though it tiptoed onto some TV shows. You can see this picture from an August 96 Nitro though, so we were trying. It was just wrong. That's the truth. This was still a whole month after Bash at the Beach though. Imagine a universe where it actually did look like this. Maybe it would have changed anything, because I'm just going to say, as we are at the end of the video, it sucks.
Taking advantage of contract blunders, only making decisions final at the very last second, or simply doing everything humanly possible to keep a huge impending moment under wraps, have all led to some of the most astonishing happenings in wrestling history. So I am Gareth, this is What Culture Wrestling, and here are the 10 best kept secrets in wrestling history. Number 10, John Cena's Royal Rumble return. A return so deeply shocking and exciting, 20,000 folks briefly forgot it wasn't cool to love John Cena during the late 2000s. Wonderful stuff. After going down injured in October 2007 with a pectoral tear, most expected to not see the face that runs the place for around 6 months to a year. But this freak of nature isn't your average human being, folks. About a month before his sensational comeback inside of Madison Square Garden during the 2008 Royal Rumble, folks within the company were already aware one of the most unlikeliest of comebacks was on, according to Bruce Pritchard on his Something to Wrestle pod. And then when the time came to execute this monumental surprise at the pay-per-view, Cena was hidden all day, and even marched through the hallway covered when the time came to finally blow the roof off of MSG. All that effort to keep this Rumble return under wraps paid off and then some in the end though. Number 9, Malachi Black is suddenly all elite. It may not have led to the sort of consistently mesmerizing run folks were hoping for, but Malachi Black's first night as an all-elite menace is still one of the most surprising and captivating Tony Khan's company has ever seen. And what made Black's arrival on the night of July 7th, 2021 so legitimately stunning was the fact not a single soul honestly thought the former NXT champion had a chance of appearing on AEW TV for at least a few more months. You see, in the wake of being released by WWE on June 2nd, most assumed Black would have to stick to the typical 90-day non-compete clause the sports entertainment company stick in their contracts. However, with Black working on the Black and Gold developmental brand for a time before being called up to the main roster, it was eventually revealed that WWE had stupidly failed to update the star's NXT 30-day non-compete clause to the usual main roster 90-day one after he hopped over to Raw and SmackDown. What came next was one of the coolest debuts in AEW history. A blackout led to the amazing reveal of the former Aleister Black secretly signing with the company, before Arn Anderson was utterly pulverized with a spinning heel kick at that year's Road Rager. Now I've got a quick question for you. What do you think's been the best ever AEW debut? Was it Malachi Black's spinning heel kick to the Arn? Or something else? You let me know in the comment section down below, baby. Number 8, Christian Cage is cleared for a Rumble comeback. Returning to the greatest multi-person match in all of wrestling now, and yet another moment nobody ever thought could actually be a possibility heading into a Royal Rumble event. Now sure, the prior year's men's over-the-top rope epic had seen the unlikely comeback of a certain rated R superstar, folks also once thought they'd never see bumping again. But rumors of Edge's impossible return becoming a reality were very much doing the rounds before the 2020 Rumble. The same could not be said for the WWE Hall of Famer's best pal though. Though he had technically taken part in an unsanctioned fight with Randy Orton in 2020, away from that 1-minute squash, Christian hadn't been involved in a match since retiring due to concussion issues. That all changed on the night of the 2021 Men's Rumble, however, with Christian and a few others actually being made aware of the fact he'd been cleared to return a few months before the event, after them managing to keep that vital information a secret in the time leading up to the Thunderdome show. Captain Charisma was finally given the thumbs up to make a jaw-dropping comeback to action on the Friday before the PLE, and with that, the once unthinkable visual of Edge and Christian competing in a WWE match together soon unexpectedly warmed the hearts of genuinely stunned fans around the globe. Number 7, no one knew Pat McAfee was going to be calling the Rumble 2023 action. It wasn't just those watching the 2023 Royal Rumble inside of the Alamo Dome and at home that were caught entirely off guard by Pat McAfee's unannounced arrival that night. If it wasn't already clear from the way an unquestionably stunned and overjoyed Michael Cole reacted to the return of his Blue Show pal, and Corey Graves' hilarious exasperation at being nudged down the bench, it was later noted that neither man had any clue Pat was going to be back that night. The majority of WWE's production crew weren't told about the awesome McAfee secret either, with WWE's decision to keep the epic return to the booth close to the vest, kicking the event off in the most unpredictable and joyous way imaginable. Watching a legitimately giddy Cole then be told in real time that his mate would be joining the twosome for the entire night of action was a terrifically wholesome moment too, and one that wouldn't have been possible had someone let the pat out of the bag beforehand. Number 6, Roman Reigns wrecks everybody out of nowhere. Heading into the first crowdless SummerSlam in WWE history, the company promised the folks locked up in their homes around the world that they would never see it coming. And in what had become something of a rarity at that point, WWE actually only went and delivered a truly remarkable shock that no fan on the planet honestly foresaw in the weeks before the biggest party of the summer. The big dog hadn't been seen on WWE programming since dropping out of WrestleMania 36 and taking some time away from wrestling during those early pandemic days. And with there being very few hints at exactly what the future held for the former world champion in the months that followed the show of shows, outside of WWE eventually releasing new merch for the absent figure, most understandably assumed that aforementioned tagline was likely just referring to even more demented fiend Braun Strowman shenanigans in the main event. What they didn't expect to see was Roman Reigns not only making a shocking post-match return to all things sports entertainment, but as a badass heel who ate spooky monsters for breakfast at the head of the table. To ensure this monumental show-closing return would come as a real game-changing shock to much of the wrestling world, Dave Meltzers noted on Wrestling Observer Radio that WWE didn't even tell a bunch of Roman's fellow superstars that he was about to come back and kick off one of the most dominant runs in wrestling history either, and he's never looked back since. Cheers for watching this video today, and if you like what you see, then go and hit that subscribe button down below. Number 5, Shane O'Mac brings back the money. Long before he strutted out as one of WrestleMania 39's best-kept secrets, and unfortunately limped back out again a minute or so later, Shane McMahon found himself in the middle of an even bigger shock return in 2016. It had been announced that someone was going to be handed the most prestigious award that WWE will ever present on the night of February 22nd, that being the Vincent J. McMahon Legacy of Excellence Award, of course. But just before Vince could hand the award over to the on-screen heel with a quote-unquote warm, good-hearted soul known as Stephanie McMahon, a rather familiar tune blasted through the speakers. The money was back, baby! And a crowd that had just spent much of the last few minutes groaning and watting their way through another soul-crushing start to Raw suddenly erupted in stunned euphoria. Nobody had a Shane O'Mac comeback on their 2016 WWE bingo card, that's for sure. Vince would later tell the Orlando Sentinel that the big reveal was kept a secret thanks to Shane being locked away on a bus until the moment Stephanie's music hit that night. And when Shane-O did eventually show up in Gorilla moments before shaking things up a little, the folks sat around reportedly said they couldn't believe what was happening. They were likely saying something similar back in April, after watching Snoop Dogg drop a surreal people's elbow to cover for the destroyer of the 2022 Men's Royal Rumble's torn quad. Number 4, it's Sting in AEW. Returning to an era most folks understandably don't have the fondest memories of, AEW also managed to give their audience a much-needed shot of completely unforeseen joy during their first ever Dynamite Winter is Coming event in 2020. Now sure, folks were aware that the legendary Sting had quietly parted ways with WWE midway through the year, and it did feel like AEW was a logical destination for the icon at some point in the future. But very few predicted precisely when that debut was going to go down, and that was largely due to the likes of the Young Bucks and Tony Khan keeping Sting's incredible arrival under wraps for months. Matt and Nick Jackson would also confirm to Living the Gimmick that they used the old hide your massive surprise in a trailer trick on the day of the event. And when it was finally time for the Stinger to wander into position, the EVPs recalled watching the genuinely shocked talent inevitably mark out around him. Similar reactions were no doubt happening all over the planet when Tony Schiavone let out an iconic "It's Sting" for the first time on AEW programming, as all involved pulled off one of the finest surprise arrivals of the modern era. Number 3, Mark Henry was far from finished. After being a part of the WWE system since 1996, lifting World Championship gold and enjoying a terrific Hall of Pain run, most fans were quick to believe the once unstoppable Mark Henry was done when he began teasing retirement on Twitter in June of 2013. And right up to the moment the emotional powerhouse had his arm raised by John Cena after telling those watching on that he was retiring from the active roster, there wasn't a person out there who didn't fully believe they were watching the end of the lovable big man's in-ring career. Then, in a move that left millions of jaws banging off the floor, Henry only went and revealed the entire thing was one big swerve, nailing Cena with a world's pinkest slam in the middle of the ring. Henry Henry would later admit down the road that he was actually considering retiring around this time, but after Vince McMahon talked him out of it, the committed star then spent months tricking folks into believing the end was near. And after successfully keeping the real plan to have him actually attack Cena and set up a match for Money in the Bank over the WWE Championship a secret, through his brilliant retirement teases and moving speech, Henry masterfully completed one of the greatest shock turns of all time. Number 2, Brock Lesnar beats the streak. The Undertaker's streak shockingly coming to a heartbreaking end at WrestleMania 30 was a call that very few outside of the key players involved had any idea was about to rock the Superdome. In fact, it was reported in the Wrestling Observer newsletter around the time that referee Chad Patton was actually told Taker would be walking out of New Orleans with a 22-0 record. But with the rule being for WWE officials to ref the contest as a shoot, Patton simply brought his hand down for the incredible 3. It would also later be revealed by Taker himself in an interview with Ariel Helwani that the original plan up until the day of the show was actually for the dead man to go over the beast on the grandest stage. But early that afternoon, Vince made his way into the Phenom's dressing room and secretly changed wrestling history forever, altering the old finish to the one that ultimately involved the concussed icon being F5 to smithereens for the Brock win. And just a few hours later, the entire wrestling world was left feeling utterly shook by a first ever Taker Mania L that came completely out of left field. And number 1, CM Punk comes back home to WWE. It still feels rather surreal to be living in a world where this chip magnet is once again strutting around Monday Night Raw with a potential pipe bomb in his back pocket. But after arguably the best kept wrestling secret of all time, well, here we are. After months of speculation and many a report debunking the idea of CM Punk making a shocking return to WWE, the unthinkable became a deafening reality inside of the All-State Arena in 2023. This wasn't a case of simply lying about what was on the horizon for months though. It was reported that WWE and Punk only made a deal together around 10 days or so before Survivor Series, with the wise decision then being made to keep the whole thing a secret heading into the War Games show. Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer even noted how certain TKO group executives were not told about the incoming Best in the World, with the folks in the War Games main event being among the few who actually knew Punk was in the building, and this genuinely shocking return being kept from almost everyone. All this secrecy resulted in a noise unlike anything you're ever likely to hear again, as the Punkers shocked the world one more time in Chicago.
Do you know what wrestling fans love? Secrets. They're online constantly going mad about potential news. We're weird people. I am not going to deter you from this though, and in fact, I'm going to make it even worse. For I am signed from What Culture, and this is 10 secrets no one has told you about WWE. Yet. Number 10, Baron Corbin is a French megastar. One of the better house show clips to do the rounds in 2023. When WWE returned to France, there was only one story after the fact. Baron Corbin was super over. As soon as he walked into the Paris arena, the fans erupted for this guy, and it rules, because look at his face. Corbin was genuinely moved by this, as was I a little. Nobody deserves it more. Baron has always been a company guy through and through, even when the gimmicks given to him have raised an eyebrow or two. And look what he did with Sad Corbin. Hasn't just happened, that is talent shining through. I sort of hoped WWE would get this European footage far and wide and use it for some sort of story, but they didn't. Still, given they are now traveling further afield for premium live events, let's keep our fingers crossed that one lands in France. This sort of reaction would knock people's socks off. Number 9, the Dominic Mysterio reactions are real. That's right. Enough with this conspiracy theory nonsense. Dominic Mysterio has managed to make his gimmick that he gets booed out of every building, and good. I don't care if it's fans playing along. That's what you want. Fun. Now look, let's get into it. Is there some sweetening to this by WWE? Sure, it's WWE. No, I doubt they're actually piping in jeers just because there's so many social media videos showing how loud it is. Will they use tricks like turning the volume on his microphone down so it sounds like he's being drowned out even more? I'd imagine so. Why not? The effect works. I'll be the first to admit when WWE does use that fake crowd noise, it's never ideal, but I just don't think that's happening here. The condom has found his lane, and now we're running with it. Long may it continue. Number 8, NXT is great. Right, screw all this third brand promotion. NXT is doing the work at the level of any other company, and I mean it. For starters, it combines serious and goofy wrestling near perfectly, and look at the matches it has on a near weekly basis. To convince many that Ilya Dragunov is the best wrestler in the world, That ain't no fluke. You also always know exactly what you've signed up for, so Shawn Michaels at the helm is delivering. And in the already mentioned Dominic Mysterio and Becky Lynch into it gives it proper star power too. And if I wanted to go really crazy, I would say it's better now than it ever has been. It's just so damn entertaining, plus more people than ever are tuning in. Love it. Number 7, those PLE locations are Triple H and Nick Khan's specials. One of the best things about new WWE, if we can call it that, though I just did, is what's happened to the so-called B shows. There was most definitely a time when the likes of Backlash and the Elimination Chamber were afterthoughts, but today, they rule. A huge reason for this is taking these events across the world, including next year's Chamber show coming from Perth, Australia. It's just so cool, but not literally. It's going to be boiling out there. If you want to look into how this fire was lit, though, it did come down to Triple H and WWE main man Nick Khan, who came up with this idea. I mean, why not go to the UK for Clash at the Castle? Why not go to Canada for Sami Zayn's big night? Why not go to Puerto Rico for fans so crazy every show should come from there? Why not indeed? It also had a secondary boost because it made us all believe maybe, just maybe, the hometown heroes would win unwinnable matches, so this formula is the best. Plus, if you're into WWE financials, the company also made a fortune off of these, but we'll talk about that in a second. It's why even despite the English government having no need for extra tourism, we still may get Wrestlemania over here at some point. The model has been a smash success down the card. So it's time to upgrade to the big guns, I say. Although I would say that, I can see Wembley from my house. That is an exaggeration. Number 6, yes, you did hear that right. Because indeed, I did say that in case you thought it was a verbal typo. Not only did WWE have hot crowds and great shows, the location in question gave them money to come in. As teased, this has been happening with WrestleMania for some time now, hence why we kept going back to Dallas, Texas, when those in charge decided to spread their wings and get site fees all over the place. And look, it worked. That's why Clash of the Castle was in Wales, because they threw a cool $2 million at WWE, and it was the same with Backlash. The tourism board for Puerto Rico paid $1.5 million, but they also made a killing in their own economy. That's why they're doing it. It just means it's a safe investment as WWE can add to their bottom line, but as we have seen, it's bolstered the PLE calendar to the nth degree. I still remember sitting through those Raw and SmackDown exclusive pay-per-views, and trust me, this is far, far better. Number 5, the women's division. Now, it's fair to say, in comparison to certain points in the past, the WWE women's division is thriving. I mean, they get on TV for one, and wrestlers like Michelle McCool aren't told to tone down their finisher because it's too violent for a female fight. I'm not kidding either. Somebody actually said that to her. Over the last 12 to 24 months, something odd has happened, because the women don't seem to be as well booked as they have been. We've fallen back into the rut of 2-minute matches, surprise roll-up finishes, and the women's tag team titles have been treated like the plague, and there's simply no need for it. That roster is stacked with talent. Thankfully, the hope has returned as Rhea Ripley is coming across as one of the biggest stars in the company, and Becky Lynch continues to prove her worth. Plus, the likes of Tiffany Stratton and Roxanne Perez in NXT are going to be huge. They have it all. If parity is the goal, though, this ain't it, brother. I do feel like we've had a shift as of late, but it's time to just move in the right direction and be done with it. It is flipping 2023, for goodness sake. Number 4, Triple H loves a press conference. So a lot of people like to pretend that Triple H took over WWE, looked at AEW, and stole their press conference format. That is so ridiculously silly, I don't know where to start. Go and watch some sports, for goodness sake. Furthermore, ever since the game stepped into this type of role with NXT, he would do those calls before takeovers where he would just answer all manner of questions, and now he's on the main roster, he's just upgraded them to happening after the fact. Everyone gets so mad too because of the softball questions, but what do you want somebody to do? Ask about the legality of Vince McMahon? All you're gonna get is no comment. Now that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try, you should. I can totally see why some people shy away from it. As long as you digest these as intended, they are fun though. Just an added extra to make WWE feel a little more legit. Number 3, the Seth Rollins entrance phenomenon. So Seth Rollins is an all-timer. It's important to say that because people seem to forget. WWE has relied on him for so many years, him busting out great matches all the time has become expected, and that is ludicrous. He did have to hit the reset button after that 2019 Hell in a Cell match fell to pieces, but when we zoom forward to now,
Dude has smashed it, mostly by getting people to sing his theme. Rollins has discussed this too because it was no accident. When creative were updating his presentation, he wanted as many whoas as possible in his theme song, to the point Vince McMahon stepped in and said, "Whoa, that's too many, we gotta cut back on them." Either way, it clicked. Seth somehow knew that his choir-like breakdown would result in fans hijacking Mania promo, where he just stands there with his arms out to his side. So wrestling is the best, right? Yes. Yes, it is. Number 2, more stadiums, more top. This is just something we all need to accept. If any wrestling company runs an 80,000-seater stadium and puts 40,000 bums in those chairs, that is amazing. Forget the total number, it is 40,000 individuals all coming together to watch wrestling. Believe me, that wasn't always possible. The issues out of the other side of this, though, is what social media does, because yep, as soon as one of these events starts, there are many a picture showing all of the tarp that WWE or whoever has used to try and ensure the cameras don't catch on to the unsold areas. I'm not sure why we get so mad about this. That's really smart. I suppose the fight comes to the fact that WWE will always inflate its own numbers, so the internet community at large tries to prove them wrong. I'm just going to go enjoy the show, I think. Yes. It's far easier that way. Number 1, Charlotte Flair. So that's an odd last entry, but hey, people want us to talk about it, so let's talk. Straight up, there is no doubt in my mind that Charlotte Flair is a one-of-a-kind athlete. She can do things most of us can only dream of, and the fact she did it with her family name and the pressure that brings is truly something special. WWE knows this too, hence her competing for the world title constantly. Therein lies the issue. Sometimes this happens and the fan base feels like it's not the right time. Cue arguing. I think the powers that be are aware of this as well, but Charlotte would then walk out there and have a match of the year with Rhea Ripley at WrestleMania, or that fantastic 3-way she had at SummerSlam. You cannot deny she added to those scenarios. In many ways then, she is 2017 Roman Reigns. You can't not push her because she's got it, but we also need to find a role for Flair where she can be second gear for a bit. And that's tough. I mean, Bayley even called this out during a digital exclusive promo in September, although to be fair, I'm sure that was done with this knowledge, and her tongue was firmly in cheek. Still, it's a fascinating look into how the world of sports entertainment operates, and as for the secret, do you notice how both Vince McMahon and Triple H have treated her exactly the same way? It's because they know, man. They know. If you're going to have a long wrestling career, the past has told us you may have a short period where things don't click. This is mainly due to the fact that sports entertainment never ends, so if you are appearing on a show every week for every year, yeah, nobody has that kind of batting average. Doesn't mean you can't secure yourself a legendary overall run. Here's some weird periods certain old-timers would like you to forget. Number 10, Kane in 2007. So I will die on this hill, although I do understand it. Kane should never have taken the mask off. I suppose he had to, but my thoughts don't have to make sense. The magic of that character was sort of lost. This was really reflected in 2007 when WWE didn't know what to do with the guy. Hence, we got to WrestleMania 23, and he was put in a feud with the Great Khali. One of these few occasions where a sentence rhymes, but it's still bad. As we know, the Great One wasn't the most mobile, so it was the Big Red Machine who had to take the punishment and the selling. That's just silly. See No Evil was also in cinemas, so the hook from the movie was brought into proceedings, but that made the whole thing even stranger. Now they were actually trying to kill each other. Big Daddy V was up next, and he too suffered from the exact same issue, so once more Kane was the person just getting his ass whooped. This is not the way. When you do go through the whole year, this is what WWE kept doing too. Maybe because it was a calling card of fake brother The Undertaker at one point. I mean, go through his earlier Mania matches. It was always, how on earth can he defeat somebody so much bigger? This was sort of wild, however, because all of the Dead Man's matches were better with smaller opponents. It should have been what we did with Kane too. You really don't need to watch much of what the Big Red Machine did in 2007, and it's not even his fault. He was just placed in an impossible situation. Number 9, Ric Flair in 2001 and 2002. I quite like Ric Flair coming into the WWE and being the secret new owner of the company. It was a nice way to remind you that Flair was the man, but behind the scenes, yeah, something was brewing. Triple H had been very vocal about how lacking in confidence Rick was during this time, mostly because WCW had chewed him up and spat him out. Now, even a Flair at 50% was still better than most, but it did show in his work, as it would for anyone. Rick felt like he had lost the magic, so sort of skulked around the place scared of his own shadow. Let's not pretend that we haven't all been there. It's one of the reasons Hunter did get him into Evolution as the legendary veteran so they could restore faith in himself. The difference is noticeable on TV. Before long, he felt like the old Ric Flair. from there, everything was far better. Some may say the current Rick is in a similar situation, but this is totally different. He's like a 75-year-old man now. When you bring that into the chat, yeah, kind of makes sense why this would be the way. Number 8, The Big Show in 2003. While Vince McMahon would profess to know exactly what to do with WCW's giant before he signed Paul White, it turned out this was all hot air. As soon as he did debut in the WWF as The Big Show, it was the same old thing, and any chat of being used as a special attraction was thrown out the window. It meant there was a lot of back and forth, especially because management was insistent they couldn't push him properly until he lost weight. So when we got to 2003, there were less ideas than ever. Seems odd as you're dealing with a huge man in wrestling. Sometimes things are too obvious and you forget. He did kick off the year as the world champion and ended it with the United States title, but everything in between was a head scratcher. Show did have a feud with the Undertaker and Brock Lesnar which had their moments, but by the end of each it felt like he lost more steam. I mean, he wasn't gaining anything from it. The ring-breaking spot with Brock will remain an all-timer, but as 2004 rolled around, there was even some talk that the powers that be were having second thoughts. There's no one today who can say the Big Show didn't have a Hall of Fame career when all was said and done, but times like these were confusing. He's massive, just let him tonk people. Number 7, Triple H in 1996. I suppose the best way to sell this one is that look what Triple H was within 5 years. Exactly. When he did join the WWF in the mid-90s though, ridiculous gimmicks were in. Therefore, he was introduced as Hunter Hearst Helmsley, a Greenwich blue blood who thought he was better than you because he was rich. Alright then. In 1996, however, I'm not sure the company knew what they were going to do with him because he was feuding with the likes of Duke the Dumpster Droese and got wrecked by the Ultimate Warrior at that year's Wrestlemania. He also had to have a hog pen match with Henry Godwinn. I mean, none of this was good. It wouldn't be until October when a program with Mark Merrow for the Intercontinental title heated things up. From there, it was D-Generation X. We know the rest. But for a good few months there, it looked like Triple H was going to be totally lost as he fought with the Stalker, Freddie Joe Floyd, and Savio Vega. There's nothing against those guys. They just so happened to be pegged at a lesser level. Number 6, Stone Cold Steve Austin in 2002. We talked about this in the mega ups and downs I did for WrestleMania, and it just stands out like a sore thumb. Despite all his success, the WWE had no clue what to do with Steve Austin in 2002. This really is underlined when you watch his match with Scott Hall at WrestleMania 18 because it's just a lot of nothing. Part of this was to do with Hall's personal issues, with the finish even being changed, because management wasn't convinced they could rely on Scott. It's also why Kevin Nash doesn't do much of anything on the outside. The second half of the year was even worse as Stone Cold was so down on creative he walked out of the company. But actually, this wasn't a massive shock. From January to this point, it felt like the Rattlesnake had feuded with everyone, the heel turn hadn't gone as we thought, and Steve didn't want to work with Hulk Hogan. Didn't trust him. It all imploded when Austin went on the Bite This show and very legitimately aired his grievances against his storytelling. He was then told to lose to Brock Lesnar. We know the rest. It is such a shame as it feels like a lost period of Steve's career these days, but either way, not like the rest wasn't all time. It absolutely was. Number 5, Daniel Bryan in 2011. Yes, I know. 2011 is when Daniel Bryan won the Money in the Bank briefcase and became the World Heavyweight Champion. That was great, but always will be. The issue was WWE sort of just did this and then forgot. I am not kidding. It all began at the start of the year when Bryan was the United States champion, but you know the deal there. Any mid-card title was ignored. They'd lost all their charm. It didn't get defended until Mania when he lost it to Sheamus, and when he won the briefcase, if word is to be believed, it was actually a last-minute decision to try and surprise the fans. He subsequently lost to Cody Rhodes, Sin Cara, and Wade Barrett. 2 weeks before he cashed in, he lost in 120 seconds to Alberto Del Rio. There was no interference either. He got wrecked. The Money in the Bank win did give us some hope, but yeah, Daniel was the champion in name only, as WWE had no clue what they had. It was going to take him a good few years to find out too. Number 4, Randy Orton in 2015. Randy Orton is a Hall of Famer. He is way better than most people give him credit for, but he's been going so long he falls foul to this curse more than most. Some years, WWE just shrugged their shoulders. 2015 started out okay as he feuded with The Authority before beating Seth Rollins at Mania with one of the best RKOs of all time. The thing is, who was standing tall by the end of the night? The technical loser of that match. It did mean he was the first contender for this title, but he was not victorious. Then he was back to fighting Sheamus, even though he had recently feuded with Sheamus. We sort of meandered from there until Randy very sadly hurt his shoulder, and while you never want anyone to get injured, there was an upside to this. Going away from TV for a while meant when he returned, he felt super fresh again. Even then, though, the Jinder Mahal thing happened.
think sometimes WWE takes Orton for granted. Hopefully never again. Number 3, Becky Lynch in 2017. Becky Lynch is one of the most popular wrestlers around right now. People pretend this isn't true. That's nonsense. It's been quite the rise because there was once this idea she was the 4th out of the 4 horsewomen when they were making noise, but this was mostly because WWE wasn't taking advantage of what they had. Do you remember that tag team with Naomi? It was just so random. Becky did become the first ever SmackDown Women's Champion, but it was another one of these title crownings where we didn't treat it properly. She soon lost it to Alexa Bliss, and then, yep, did nothing. Now, it actually turned out for the best because Lynch would use this in her promos when she was becoming the man, but the fact you have a whole year when she was persona non grata is just so damn short-sighted. It is all there, though. She did get overlooked for many opportunities. When WWE tried to turn her heel and the audience rejected it, we all knew she ruled. Number 2, Goldberg in 2003. Well, we all know this. WWE knows it. Bill knows it. The fans knew it. It was so obvious. We just didn't use Goldberg as Goldberg. Instead, the powers that be decided we had to WWE the WCW legend, which meant longer matches. Problem was, nobody wanted to see that. We just wanted the wrecking machine we got a couple of years before this. Dudes like Lance Storm and Rosie got ran through, but as soon as Bill was put in any program that featured a top star, it all got extended. The average Goldberg pay-per-view match in 2003 was 14 minutes. I mean, come on. Off his aura alone, he still became the world champion, but it was all such a struggle due to the above. WWE just didn't get it, and then they put him in a wig. This was dumb, and 9 times out of 10 I love dumb. This wasn't it. His return in 2016 was the way to do it, and it only took management 13 years to realize this. Whoops. Number 1, The Undertaker post-streak. So this is one for the debating team. Was The Undertaker's loss at WrestleMania 30 the turning point of his WrestleMania career? It certainly took away from his magic at the show of shows for obvious reasons, because any Mania match after this just wasn't as fun. I mean, at Mania 31 he faced Bray Wyatt, which was a double-edged sword, because nobody wanted to see Taker lose back-to-back, but we also wanted Wyatt to win. This is not an ideal scenario. 32 was Shane McMahon and 33 was Roman Reigns, a match even the dead man has said should have been better. 34 was Cena was super fun, but also kind of just there. He wasn't even on 35, didn't turn up. 36 was the Boneyard match, which was excellent as a goodbye, but I do get this. It was always going to happen for the obvious reasons. As soon as the streak was over at WrestleMania, The Undertaker became just another guy. So my word, that's something to get into. Pens at the ready. Go.
Joining the never-ending list of absurd, strange, or just plain shocking truths that have only added to the barminess of this wrestling industry over the years, here are some more utterly odd and sometimes unbelievable wrestling facts that have only recently come to light. Hi, I'm Gareth here from What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 crazy wrestler truths we just learned. Number 10, Mark Henry was once slapped by a wrestling fan, opting to not only go out of your way to touch former Olympic weightlifter and world heavyweight champion Mark Henry, but actually fully connecting with a rather powerful slap on the gigantic man is just plain stupid. But that's precisely what has gone down in the past, according to the Busted Open co-host. When talking on a recent edition of the Sirius XM podcast, the WWE Hall of Famer noted how, over the years, he has had to deal with folks hopping on his back for piggybacks, hitting him so hard it felt like they were looking for a fight, and folks poking and touching his stomach. In fact, on one occasion, that last act almost resulted in him breaking a person's arm, only for Henry's wife to step in and talk him down. And in the wake of Don Callis recently being attacked by a fan during the recent AAA Triple Mania event, it's not hard to see why Henry feels it's now time to make sure something is done to protect wrestling personalities from dealing with this sort of unpleasant situation. Number 9, WWE medical staff refused to check on Saraya's neck. Saraya's return to in-ring competition is one of the most phenomenal comeback stories of recent times, with the former WWE star joining the likes of Edge, Bryan Danielson, Christian Cage, and Sting as a performer who shockingly came out of retirement after a career-ending injury. Unlike a few of those aforementioned names though, the one-time Paige wasn't ever cleared to compete in a WWE ring again. But it wasn't for lack of trying. The now AEW outcast told Inside the Ropes recently that she actually tried to get her neck looked at a number of times while still signed to a WWE contract. However, instead of checking to see if her condition had improved, she was bluntly told that the book was closed on that, despite being being understandably disappointed at that response though, she did eventually see a doctor outside of the WWE bubble after signing a contract with Tony Khan's promotion. And after initially not being cleared to take a bump when signing on the All Elite dotted line, Saraya was finally given the green light to return to action again after a Halloween appointment with a Californian doctor to the stars. Now, what's been your favorite wrestling comeback in modern times? Well, let me know in the comment section down below. Number 8, Cody Rhodes thinks his last AEW run was a bit too meta. While the American Nightmare has been somewhat tight-lipped when it comes to how he truly felt about those final days as part of the All Elite promotion he helped create, Rhodes finally offered a rather surprising truth to Sam Roberts during a recent appearance on his podcast. According to the WrestleMania 39 main eventer, he felt his last run as a more polarizing personality was a little too meta. Rhodes' response to those crying out for him to turn heel was to boldly claim he wouldn't turn to the dark side, because that would definitely provoke some genuine heat out of those same frustrated fans, right? Well, sort of. Oh, and that final Dynamite promo, one that saw Cody passionately remind All Elite fans who helped build the alternative house they sat in, Rhodes finally admitted here that this was simply his way of telling the audience, I love you guys so much and I did all this, and if you have forgotten about it, I don't think that's cool. Number 7, Orange Cassidy has now defended his gold more than any champion in AEW history. AEW has boasted some terrific fighting champions over the course of its first 4 years of mayhem. Hangman Adam Page welcomed all AEW World Championship challengers. Jon Moxley similarly enjoyed the challenge of testing himself against the best AEW had to offer. And Jade Cargill set a record for most successful title defenses during her impressive run as the inaugural TBS champion, a record that stood for a whopping 2 months before another champion just unexpectedly overtook the dominant women's champion on July 15th. Over the course of one of the most surprisingly epic runs in recent wrestling history, Orange Cassidy has somehow defended his international championship a whopping 27 different times at time of recording, arguably turning the strap into a more coveted belt than the TNT gold in the process. It's a crazy stat that few honestly ever saw coming when Freshly Squeezed first toppled Pac back in October 2022, but his clever besting of Lance Archer at Battle of the Belt 7 has now firmly established this layabout genius as the true workhorse champion of AEW. Number 6, Bret Hart offered to be an AEW agent and they said no. With his stellar work evidently inspiring much of the All Elite roster, and the icon himself even unveiling the AEW World Championship for the very first time at Double or Nothing 2019, Bret the Hitman Hart's presence will forever be felt in Tony Khan's company. However, if the wrestling legend had it his way, he likely would have been even more involved with WWE's biggest rivals. That's according to pro wrestling writer Brian R. Solomon, with the author of Blood and Fire explaining on Twitter or X or whatever the hell it is recently that a conversation with the Hitman revealed that Bret had actually offered to agent for AEW at one point, but instead of bringing in one of the greatest minds the business has ever seen to coach and work with their talent, AEW told Hart that they would only want him to work as a manager if he were to become All Elite. Hart did tell Lucha Libre Online last year that he would still be open to working with AEW talent, before noting how he was very much happily retired and enjoying being at home. But it's still remarkable to learn that one of the true goats of the wrestling industry had their offer to guide the next generation turned down by TK and his team. What were they thinking? Number 5, Vince McMahon's comeback led to Eric Young's WWE departure before he could even properly return. Back in November 2022, the one-time Sanity leader Eric Young reportedly made an unexpected return to WWE. Before the one-time Impact star could re-debut on the main roster, however, the former NXT Tag Team Champion quietly exited the company once again in April, with Young finally explaining his reasons for doing so when speaking to PW Insider recently, alluding to reports of Young's departure from WWE being linked to the return of Vince McMahon as executive chairman. The star revealed that he had signed up for one thing, only for it to eventually turn into something else entirely. In Young's mind, personally, professionally, and more importantly for him, morally, he just couldn't work there anymore. It was also revealed by Fightful Select recently that Young was actually part of a plan to bring in a new Wyatt family stable at one stage, with that position in the creepy unit likely putting EY in a pretty significant spot in the company. In the end though, once the two-time Impact World Champion's non-compete period was up, Young was happy to return to his former employer, rocking up at Slammiversary 2023 in July, and seemingly having the time of his damn life back in the company he never wanted to leave. Number 4, Tommaso Ciampa didn't know his old theme was coming back until just before his entrance. After not being seen on WWE TV since all the way back in September, Tommaso Ciampa finally made his return on June 20th episode of Monday Night Raw. And not only that, the former NXT champion's comeback also brought with it the return of his awesome No One Will Survive banger of a theme tune. This didn't just stun those passionate Blackheart fans around the globe though. As the one-time DIY guy would note to Ryan Satin recently on his Out of Character podcast, Ciampa also didn't have a clue his original NXT tune was going to accompany him on his way to the ring to batter one-time pal The Miz, until seconds before he strutted through the curtain. The discussion over what piece of music would be used actually only went down about 3 minutes before he made his surprise return official, with Ciampa explaining how his old developmental song would likely work better than his latest main roster music for this exciting moment. And someone with power clearly agreed, as No One Will Survive soon erupted through the speakers to shock both Ciampa and the Cleveland, Ohio audience. Number 3, Seth Rollins' body is wrecked. The current World Heavyweight Champion has been wrestling at a high level on WWE programming for over a decade now, but during his recent appearance on one-time rival Logan Paul's Impulsive podcast, Seth Rollins explained how all those years have actually left his body more banged up than you likely realized. According to the Visionary, his lower back has been bothering him since all the way back in 2019, with the champ adding that there are a couple of stress fractures back there that probably require surgery. On top of that, Rollins' knee has been causing him issues since before WrestleMania 39, and his neck has been acting up too. Simply put, he's a little bit battered right now. The flamboyant main eventer does try to change up his workout routines depending on how his broken body feels, and even resorted to stem cell treatment in a bid to solve his physical issues. But all the treatments did was temporarily solve the problem. Despite his body being this wrecked from the years of working and not giving himself the rest it clearly needs though, the Red Show superstar still feels he can go at a high level for a further 6 or even 10 years. So don't expect those woes to go away anytime soon, folks. Number 2, John Cena's first WWE deal only just covered his rent after living in his car. He may be living a rather glamorous life now, but things definitely weren't always this way for John Cena. Jumping all the way back to the time before he landed in WWE's OVW developmental territory, Cena noted a few years back that he was actually choosing to live in his car whilst trying to make it in the fitness world in Los Angeles. Then, after recently revealing on the Heart to Heart show how he also tried and failed to become a cop at one point, Cena upgraded to living in a garage for a few months before WWE eventually came calling. And when he was finally offered a deal with the biggest wrestling promotion on the planet, the eventual Legend's contract saw him earn just $12,000 a year. The future multiple-time world champion's rent at the time was $1,000 a month, meaning all that WWE dollar went straight on keeping a roof over his head to achieve his new dream. Fast forward a few decades though, and it's safe to say that all that time spent sleeping in his Lincoln Continental, showering at work, and not having any money in his pocket certainly paid off for this hard-working icon. Number 1, The Big Show used to eat up to 18,000 calories a day. At his heaviest, the most recognizable wrestling giant of the last 2 decades weighed in at a staggering 500 pounds. And if you've ever wondered exactly how much food you need to consistently put away every day to maintain such a colossal weight, Paul White finally offered up the answer during a recent TalkSport interview. In the one-time Big Show's own words, he actually used to consume an astonishing 13,000 to 18,000 calories each and every day to keep himself that size. And these weren't exactly the cleanest calories available either. For example, a trip to a local McDonald's would involve him ordering 3 or 4 Big Macs, fries, a shake, apple pies, and probably a fish sandwich too. Sounds pretty standard to me. And a trip to Taco Bell usually saw the former world champion chowing down on 20 tacos. As White got older, however, he soon realized that eating this much junk food wasn't exactly sustainable, with the star now eating like a mouse as he prepares himself for another return to the All Elite Squared Circle after having his knee replaced last summer. Wishing you all the best, big guy.